Hey viewers, welcome to VL Astrology. Once again, I'm Vanitha Lenka. I'm a Vedic astrologer, and today I have on board Sir James Braha again. Welcome, sir, to VL Astrology. Sir is going to be talking about the book that he has written of late and is going to be getting launched, I think, soon, sometime in the near future. And he's going to be talking about Saturn, the Karma Karak. Sir, all yours.
Okay, so everybody knows I've been working on the Braha Sutras, which is a very Saturnian book. When you see the cover, you'll see how Saturnian this book is. It's really
looking forward, actually, eagerly.
It's taken a year.
Wow.
It much longer and much more difficult to write than I thought. I kept going back and fixing. But the writing is done, and we're now in the book layout. Normally, I would say it's going to be out January, the first week of January, but it's Mercury retrograde. I'm getting hit again. I always get, when my books come out, somehow they're always around the retrograde. And when I was young, I didn't have the patience to wait.
Right.
And that's turned out to be, those are some of the worst decisions I ever made, doing things on Mercury retrograde. So it probably will be the early February. Even though it'll be done by January, I won't put it out.
Okay.
So
we'll know, definitely, we'll know.
Yes, you'll definitely know. Every so often, I post a sutra on Facebook, and I've been doing this, not just sutras, but other times when I post on Facebook, I'm always talking about the negative attributes of Saturn. And I always get a few people say, oh, that's great. Oh, that's wonderful. And somebody said, well, what about the good parts of Saturn? I'm not talking about that right now. But I realized that I've done that for so long that people probably think I have this horrible view of Saturn. And I don't. I love Saturn. Oh, and those are my Shiva Lingams back there.
Very, very nice. These are beautiful Shiva Lingams that you have. And the Nataraj also.
Saturn is, I mean, really everything about my life is more Saturnian than anything. And as I get older, the older I get, the better my life gets. That's not the case with all my friends. But Saturn is so well disposed and so strong in my horoscope. And I'm going to start with two stories about Saturn, both of which should make you laugh. And I'm wearing blue and black for Saturn today. And we can even do a Saturn mantra. Nilanjana samabasam ravi putram yamagrajam chayamatan sambhutam tam namami sanicharam. So I have two funny stories of Saturn. One is my father, who everybody's heard me say, oh, my father's a saint. My father was a saint. It wasn't a saint, but he had his faults too. But he had Saturn in the first house. And he only thought about other people. He was kind. I could never find the flaws in my father, except for things like being narrow-minded or from a different generation. But he never, ever harmed anybody. And we used to have a store. We had a gift store on Miami Beach. And I would say once every month or so, a customer would leave their handbag in the store, and they would leave by accident. And my father would grab the handbag. He'd say, Jimmy, run after that woman, run after that woman. And my mother would say, no, leave it here. She'll come back she'll come back and buy more. So which one do you think had Saturn in the first house? It wasn't my mother. Now I'm teaching, I'm writing my book. I'm living on Mount Soma. And there's 3 or 4 women that want to learn astrology. And so on Sundays, they come over and I teach them some astrology. I've been doing this for, it must be 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
And occasionally I have a hiatal hernia, and sometimes I get heartburn because of that. I've tried every method you can possibly try, So anyway, I manage it, but I don't take those extreme pills that wipe everything out. That's no good. But I do take baking soda.
Mm-hmm.
So every so often, I'll be teaching the class and I'll go for some baking soda, and this is what it looks like, and I put it in my
In the water.
in my water, right? So there's one woman there, and she's very Saturnian, she's very respectful,
Mm-hmm.
and she's very heavily into healing and health.
Right.
So after 3 months, she finally comes up to me and says, "James, is that sugar that you're putting in the water?" I have not been able to stop laughing.
Laughing.
She waited that long. She was that respectful. James, is that sugar you're putting in your water?
So what was your answer to that?
I just laughed. I told her, but I laughed. I
Yeah.
haven't stopped laughing. Her name is Rayshawn, but she's so embodies the higher qualities of Saturn.
Yeah. She kept patience, actually. She just kept looking at you, what you're doing, and then finally she came up with it.
She didn't want to insult me. So I want to talk about the higher qualities of Saturn, which really, when I think about my life and how difficult the first 20 years were, 25 years, it's largely because I am so Saturnian. Saturn is in the 5th house, aspected by Jupiter to the degree. It's an overly strong Saturn. It's an overly, so childhood and the earlier years, everybody else was having fun, and I was always being overly serious. And my childhood was ruined to some extent because Saturn is so strong. But that Saturn also gave me, even in childhood, even in the early years, it gave me tremendous benefits. And this book, I wrote down some of the sutras titles, some of the sutra titles, just so you can hear how Saturnian in a good way. So I'm always talking about Saturn's aspecting the 7th, it's a divorce. Saturn aspects the 5th, it's an unwanted pregnancy or a child death. I'm always talking about that. So today we're going to talk about the good things of Saturn.
Sure.
But this particular book, I'm just going to read a few of these titles. Sure. Number 1 in the book is follow the 7 and 10 rule. If a technique doesn't work 7 out of 10 times, dump it. You don't need it if it doesn't work. And if there's exceptions and there's all kinds of different rules, that usually we were talking the other day about planetary war. And I said, I have not found planetary war to work, because if it's a benefic,
yes, or
the malefic, the malefic wins and the benefic loses. The planetary war doesn't matter at all.
Right. And
somebody was a friend was reading my book and said, you better add, there's some extra rules about planetary war. And then we were discussing it, and he said, you know what, whenever there's all these different rules, it means the technique doesn't work. Right. But anyway, another one, speak only what you know. If you don't really know it, that's Saturn. For counseling to succeed, the client has to trust the astrologer. So in the first 5-10 minutes, I do an overview, letting them know that I'm going to be accurate, getting their attention by just the basic things about their life.
Right.
Preparation is vital. I know lots of astrologers don't even look at a chart until they do it. This is really not a good thing.
No.
Astrologers have to work on self-development. If you haven't worked on yourself, I mean, I don't know what good you're going to do to other people.
True.
You can never get enough of what won't make you a great astrologer. People think what's going to make me great is these little tips to be able to predict that and predict that. That's not what makes you great. What makes you great is the ability to think, the ability to reason and process for yourself. You take what the teachers have given you, and you use that, but you don't make the teachers or the books the gods. You have to learn that stuff, and then you have to rely on your own thought process.
Hmm.
Students and astrologers are always trying to take the easy way out.
Hmm.
And in the introduction of this book, I talk about how I give about 25 different examples of the way to take the easy way out. Don't bother don't bother seeing if the birth time is accurate. Don't care if it's on the hour or half hour. Don't use the Bava chart. I mean, there's just so many ways to take the easy way out.
True.
And we're all human. We all want to take the easy way out. We all want to be lazy, but the stronger that Saturn is in the chart, the better the astrologer you're going to be. I've said this on one other video, and I say it in the book. I've never met an astrologer who was too skeptical. The more skeptical that you are, the better the astrologer you're going to be. The more you think, oh, it came into my head, it must be accurate. No, the ancient sages, Vedic astrology is an ancient art. If they wanted it to be psychic, they could have said, here's the horoscope, look at it, close your eyes and see what thoughts come to you. That's not what they said. It's a very Saturnian. Another one is acceptance of what is. So if you want life to give you exactly what you want, it's a recipe for disappointment. You're going to suffer because Werner Erhard said, life is a ripoff when you expect to get what you want.
True.
Choose what you get, life will be. Anyway.
Go with the flow.
So, yeah. And then the other is, one of the sutras is gratitude brings happiness and ease of living and grace. Selfishness brings misery. Where do you think you get gratitude? Gratitude comes from Saturn. Gratitude comes from understanding that there are limitations. And as you grow up, you learn to live with the limitations. You learn to make something good of life, even with all the suffering. Buddha said, Buddha had 4 noble truths. The first is life is suffering. Because we all die, people get sick, we don't get what we want. But when you learn to, acceptance of what is, and when you cultivate gratitude, I tell you what, the acknowledgments in this book, toward the end of it, I said, I stopped writing long acknowledgments several books ago.
Right.
But in this one, the acknowledgments are longer than ever because the older I get, and I'm in Saturn Dasha, and I feel so much gratitude. Yeah. I in the last 40 years, I have had so much support from the astrological community. Yeah. I mean, people see my flaws; they don't say them. Oh, we better not tell him. But I know that they're there. But I've had so much support from people, and there's so much gratitude. And the more gratitude, the happier you will be. So these are all Saturnian. They're all Saturnian benefits. Saturn in my case is very rare. It's very rare. One of the sutras in the book is, it took me 20 years to realize, I'll be honest, it took me 30. Saturn, even when exalted, is never as good as what I expected it should be. Jupiter, when it's fallen, is never as bad as I expected.
Yes.
It took a long time.
True.
Most people's Saturns are pretty difficult. Mine, since early childhood, anytime I entered a Saturn bhukti, my life went way up to the top. Wow. As an actor, suddenly I'd get the leading roles. As a meditation teacher, suddenly I'd be in the New York Center, which was a big deal. Then when I came to Saturn bhukti, I wrote my first book. Saturn is always magnificent for me. Now, when I was in India, I knew this. The second time I was there, when I was with Padia in 84, not 82. And by now I had studied Jyotish and I knew it, and I saw how good my Saturn periods. I said, what do you think my Saturn Dasha will be like? And he said, it'll be spiritual. And I said, oh, I wanted it to be career because it rules the 10th and the 9th. And I've had luck in both. So, but by the time I got to the Saturn Dasha, I had already really gained or really understood Advaita non-duality. I didn't care about career. I didn't care about religion. Those things are all gone. The major desires are gone. Anyway, when the Saturn Dasha began, what I would have expected was big career, which is what's happening now. Wait until you see the Braha Sutras. It's
okay.
The Braha Sutras. You know, when I wrote my other books, I would teach everything I knew, but what did I know? What I know now, after doing 10,000 horoscopes, is a lot. Not scholarly. I'm not a scholar. I'm not an academic, but I know from experience how the horoscopes work. So all of that is in this book. This is the Saturn Dasha. So it's really pleasing me. But it took 3 or 4 years. It took 3 or 4 years. When Saturn began, very little happened. What happened was my teeth. I had teeth problems.
Okay.
Very little happened with religion, philosophy, travel, 9th house. Very little happened with the career. 3, 4 years into it, I said, you know, I've got to update these books. So I finally got to I kept putting it off because it was so tedious. Updating 6 books was going to be a nightmare. But I went through it. I spent a year on the ancient Hindu revision, and I was really happy. And then immediately, as soon as that was over, I started writing this new book. Most people in Saturn Dasha do not get the luck that I get. Mine is because it's in the 5th house, aspected by Jupiter to the degree. So yeah, that was a nightmare scenario as a growing up. It was terrible. I couldn't have any fun. So, and my brother had Jupiter in the 5th house in Sagittarius. His life is all fun and mine is all serious. But anyway, so Saturn is what makes people responsible and disciplined. And if you don't have a strong Saturn, a good Saturn, and that is lacking, nothing causes more suffering than being irresponsible. When a person's irresponsible, it causes all kinds of problems. So you also get the highest qualities. You know, people complain about the 12th house. Oh, it's a terrible house. The 12th house represents the greatest benefit in existence, which is moksha, even though it's a bad house. Saturn causes all these problems, but it gives you gratefulness. It gives you humility, responsibility. Most people that have an overly strong Saturn help other people and are responsible to other people, not enough to themselves. That causes some suffering. But if you take the person with Saturn in the 1st house, you have a person that you can rely on. You can rely on them because they're going to do the job. They're going to do what they say they do. They're going to help you out. They're also going to have the qualities of humility, humility and responsibility. These are wonderful, wonderful qualities. You have Saturn and then also you have the person who is, in the scriptures, it would say, the person will be leader of his village by virtue of wisdom. When you look at the charts of US presidents, every single one of them has Mars very strong. Mars conjunct Sun, Mars conjunct Moon, Mars conjunct Mercury, Mars opposite Mercury. They're very Marsy because they're a commander-in-chief. They rule the military and they're Marsy. Jimmy Carter has Mars, I think it's Mars opposite Venus. It's a very strong, tightly so. It's a very strong Mars. But his leadership was from Saturn in the 1st house in Libra. So he was leader of his village by virtue of wisdom. So his thinking was all about human rights. It was all, you know, it was that kind of thing. It wasn't me. It's what I can do for other people. That's Saturn in the 1st house. So those are the higher qualities. Then you take someone with Saturn, say, in the 2nd house. This is a very odd fact. when I write my books, when I was updating the ancient Hindu astrology in 2020, I was, updating all the planets in the houses. And when I do those sort of things, I like to see what other astrologers have said. And I was reading Isabel Hickey's Western astrology book, and she was talking about Saturn in the second house. And she said, look for huge inheritances. I thought, that's odd. But I actually know someone. The inheritance that this person has is probably in the billions, just inherited
Wow.
wealth. Saturn in the second house.
Second house.
Now,
Yes.
That's going to be rare. That's not a 7 in 10. 7 out of 10 people are not going to have that, but a certain amount of them do. But it also means that that person can be very focused and very disciplined and very responsible with money. Another thing is that, for example, when Saturn transits the second house, most people, I'd say 7 out of 10, have money problems. Most people.
Scarcity, yeah.
The other people, maybe the 3 out of 10, Saturn transits the second house, and I say, oh, did you have money problems this year? They said, no, I made more money than
more
ever.
money. Yes.
Yeah. Now, where that's coming from, it's always important with astrology not just to say, oh, this planet does this. You want to understand why. And the reason of it is, whenever Saturn transits a house, it's trying to teach you lessons.
Absolutely.
So if the person has been responsible about money, that's all their lives, or for 20 or 30 years, Saturn transits the second house, that's when they make more money than normal. Now, when I say that they've been responsible, I don't mean that they've paid their bills on time. What I mean is, these are the people where money was an important issue. When they were 20 or 30, they said, I want to make money. That's what I want. So they focused on it. They concentrated on it. There was nothing for them to learn. They already spent their lives working on it. They make more than ever. Then you take Saturn in the third house, which is bad for relatives. And it's got its negatives, and siblings and all. But Saturn in the third house is the greatest worker in the world. These people, when I see a person with Saturn, if I'm rectifying a chart, if I don't know if it's this ascendant or that ascendant, and Saturn's either the second or third, I'll say, do you work really, really hard? It'll either be a yes or a no. And it's not just the benefit of the fact that they work really hard. It's that they don't mind. In fact, they could get other people to help them. They'd rather not, because they want to do it the right way. There was a guru, Maharishi. This is the TM guru. It was my guru in my 20s, and he used to say, "See the job, do the job, stay out of the misery." Well, who can do that? Who can do that? The people with Saturn in the third house. I know these people with Saturn they don't mind working. They work harder than ever, and they don't mind that work.
Right.
Now, I'm going to tell you one of the most bizarre Saturn features that I learned in the last 5-6 years. People with Saturn in the fourth house, they're often depressed, not in the mind, but in the heart. Yep. They feel a heaviness of heart. But and a lot of them will die of heart ailments if Saturn's in a bad sign in the fourth. And yet, these people are known by others to have a huge heart. When you go to a Bruce Springsteen concert, he's got Saturn in the fourth, I believe in Leo, a bad sign. He's all heart. That man will play music for the audience forever and ever, and it's all heart. And you see people that have Saturn in the fourth house, and when they die, everybody says, oh God, he really cared. He cared for everybody. It's a huge benefit. And one of the one of the hardest things in astrology, really, this is really torturous for me. I'll see a chart with Saturn conjunct Mars. And I know the person's going to have mechanical, technical skills. They're going to have push, pull, a desire, and then holding back, a desire, and then holding back. However, Saturn restricts and causes problems, but Saturn also gives discipline and weight to that planet. So if it's you see a lot of artists with Saturn conjunct Venus.
Yes.
It's kind of shocking because Saturn, Venus, it makes them shy. They're very shy in love affairs and they compromise too much in love affairs. But a lot of them are artists because Saturn, that's what Saturn does.
Right.
The main message of my book, the main message is that astrology is, you have to memorize all this information, which takes years. And then it's the thinking process that will get you better and better. Now, this is how I have experienced it, right? But this is personal to me because Saturn is in my fifth house, the house of the mind. So in school, I was terrible. And when someone tries to teach me something, I remember Santanam. When I went to India, I had already been in Western astrology 4 or 5 years. Isabel Hickey had said the nodes are so important, the North Node, South Node, not Rahu Ketu, but in the Western, the South Node, North Node. And I took that to heart and it made sense to me. But I could never understand what the hell I could never understand what the hell the nodes are. So I asked Santanam to teach me, what are these nodes? The ecliptic and the elliptic and this and that. He tried our sessions were 3 hours long every night. I think we spent an entire session. I still couldn't figure it out because my brain it doesn't work for certain things. But when it comes to astrology, the thing about the nodes is it's a scientific thing, so I don't really care enough about it. Whereas trying to find the truth in life and trying to find the truth in a horoscope is everything to me. And so my mind will it took me 30 years to figure out how could Mercury be connected to the mother? Well, Mercury's the nervous system, you're in the womb. So these are things that I think about day after day for 20, 30, 40 years. The thinking doesn't stop. That's the message of the Braha Sutras. Now, I do all the thinking for 30, 40 years. The thinking doesn't stop. That's the message of the Braha Sutras. Now, I do all the thinking for you and telling you this is what I found out and this is what I learned. But that's not the point. The point is for you to allow your mind to do the thinking and trust the mind like that.
True.
So the part of the I stopped doing astrology from 2005 to 2010, mainly because I was burned out, and also I had learned Advaita, and I said, well, if the world's Maya and it's illusion, and I don't want to do astrology, I'm just doing it to make money. I don't want to do it. So I stopped, not knowing what the hell I would do. And I stopped and I was fine. I made money through investments. But Saturn in the fifth house is about very few children. I have one. Children later in life at 47. So those are the negatives. During my son's childhood, from when he was born until he went to college, because Saturn's in the fifth house, so much of my attention was on my child, even when I wasn't particularly doing anything with him. It wasn't, maybe he'd be at school or whatever, but I didn't realize just what that Saturn in the fifth house, how much focus on my child it was giving until when he went to college. When he went to college, suddenly there was a vacuum that was huge. And I think to myself, you know, people remember James Braha stopped doing astrology. He's not in the astrology world anymore. And now suddenly, after he left, after college, I started updating the books, and suddenly I'm you know, doing YouTubes, and I'm back. That's
Right.
because the Saturn was giving so much focus,
Mm.
and that's what it does. So, you know, one of the things I've always said is that a person's greatest liability, their greatest problems and liability, are also their greatest achievements. It's you have both. The
Right.
problem, if you focus on those problems, eventually you figure them out and make the most of them. So Saturn in the sixth house gives the blessings of a fine appetite, which in this culture is no good because you get fat. But Saturn in the sixth house, you overcome enemies and competitors and jealous people. It also means that you're going to work really hard. You're going to be very committed to your job, very focused. You may decide to get into health and healing matters. That'll be more a matter of the entire chart. But the greatest benefit there is that if you have Saturn in the sixth house, you will defeat your enemies and your competitors and jealous people and things like that.
And what about the health?
The Saturn in the seventh house is Saturn in the sixth house is wonderful for health, unless it's afflicted. If it's afflicted, then you're going to have problems with the teeth and the bones and arthritis.
Right.
Otherwise, Saturn in the sixth, it's an Upachaya house. It's wonderful for health. It's wonderful for defeating enemies and competitors. I have a very weak sixth house. Venus rules my sixth house. It's very weak. And when the first time I ever went to play baseball, I was really good in softball. Now came Little League, and this guy was throwing the ball at, 60 miles an hour, or whatever the hell it was. And suddenly, it was the first time I ever realized in baseball that there was an enemy. And I was pretty helpless. No, seriously, I wanted to be a baseball player, and nature got in the way of it. Basically, nature just put an end to that. Me and one other kid were the only kids that were left off the Little League team, and I really wanted to be a ball player. But and once that got ahead of me, there was no way to learn the fast playing anyway. But I realized something later on. I never could have succeeded as a baseball player because the pitcher is an enemy.
Right.
And so to be in sports, you need Mars and Jupiter. Mars and Jupiter, and you need to have a good sixth house to defeat the enemies. I really never put Jupiter to sports until maybe 20 years ago. For the first 20 years, I just looked at Mars. Do you know why Jupiter is sports? Because sports is a game. It's fun.
Right.
It's fun. Saturn in the seventh house is amazing to me, not for anything with the spouse, but Saturn gets Dikbala in the seventh house.
Right.
So people may think, oh, Saturn gets directional strength, Dikbala in the seventh house. So they think that's going to make marriage better. It's not going to make marriage better in any way, shape, or form. But Saturn becomes powerful. That means that, like, my Saturn is super powerful. My whole life has been Saturnian.
Right.
The Saturn, when it's angular, it harms the married life, but it makes Saturn very strong. So the houses that Saturn rules will do better, and the person will have good discipline, responsibility, and things like that. For business, Saturn in the seventh house may be good. I'd still be careful of partners,
right,
and partnerships. But if you have a business and you have Saturn in the seventh house, the tendency for organization and administration is going to be very good.
True.
Saturn in the
to some connection with foreign lands also. I've seen Saturn in the seventh.
Well, that's one of the sutras in my book.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, is that people think, so many astrology students think that the ninth house will tell you if a person's going to live in a foreign land. No, the ninth house will tell you if the person is going to travel, if they're going to love travel,
Right.
if they're going to have good experiences in foreign countries, good experience. But what gets you to the foreign country to live there is the afflicted seventh house.
Right.
The worse the seventh house is, the more likely the person's going to live overseas.
And the fourth house.
Well, I'm just telling you what I know. For me, it's
Seventh house.
the seventh house, yeah.
Right.
But I won't agree with you. Now, what I will do
Okay.
is, for the next couple of weeks, I'm going to be thinking, really? The fourth house? I got to think about that. But I'm not going to say anything unless I know it. All right. So what I know is the seventh. Saturn in the eighth. I don't know. I don't really have a lot to say about Saturn in the eighth. Anything that goes into the eighth is going to be harmed. So the houses Saturn rules. But I would say it probably depends on the sign and things like that. I would say the one thing I always say about Saturn in the eighth house, longevity.
Right.
Saturn is the planet of longevity. It's in the house of longevity. The way it works is, everybody loves to call the eighth house the house of death, and it's really the opposite. The eighth house is the house of life. It's the house of life. And if it's bad, you die. You don't have a lot of life energy. If you see people that have Jupiter, Venus, Moon in the eighth, they have a lot of life energy. They're filled, brimming with life energy, like that. So under normal circumstances, you'd think that Saturn would hurt the eighth, but it doesn't, because it's the planet of longevity. And what it does is, the people with the benefics in the eighth house live long because they have so much life energy.
True.
The person with Saturn in the eighth house lives long because of a very conservative use of energy. Now, if Saturn is well disposed, like I have a very well disposed Saturn, and so I was just telling Vashti, my wife, yesterday, I was telling her that we were watching a movie and I saw a big bridge. And I said, in the 40s and the 20s and 30s and 40s and 50s, when they used to build these huge bridges, they always knew that 5 or 10 people would fall to their death. Now, there might be 1,000 people working on that bridge, but I said to her, as soon as I would hear that, I would say, well, I'm out of there, because who knows who the 5 or 7 are going to be.
Right.
That is how strong my Saturn is. Saturn is keeping me living long out of caution. Out of caution. Now, if a person doesn't have
you never know who's going to fall. Yeah, true.
Right. But if you don't have a strong Saturn, then you just don't think about that. You just see, from the time I was a kid, I was always thinking caution, fear, caution. It was all Saturnian, which was no good as a kid. But now
Protection.
It's great.
Basically, you have been protective towards your own people. Yeah.
Also, the amount of times, way before middle age, the amount of times that I have almost fallen and killed myself because I have Venus conjunct Mars within 2 degrees in the fourth house.
All right.
So I'm always running around trying to get something done, just going fast. So I'm always almost falling, but I never fall. I almost never hit the ground. Almost never. That's because of Saturn. Saturn gives balance. The sign, it's exalted in Libra, the signs of balance. Saturn gives a person balance, and that has always helped.
True.
I also think that, the eighth house is not, it's explained very well in Western astrology, because they connect the 8th house with Scorpio.
Mm-hmm.
In the Hindu system, the signs are not as in depth. They should be, but they're not. And so when a planet transits the 8th house is the Scorpio house, and Scorpio is desires.
Okay.
So when a heavy planet transits the 8th house, the person examines their attachments. Their buttons get pressed. When Saturn transits the 8th house, or Uranus transits, or Pluto, the person is going to have a number of years where anytime they don't get their desires fulfilled, there's pain. So, and it's a learning process to let go of attachment, because that's where the pain comes.
Right.
So Saturn in the 8th house, I suspect, is going to make a person who is going to go through a lot emotionally, psychologically throughout life. They will have Scorpio and Pluto. They are the sign and planet of death and rebirth.
Right.
So when your attachment doesn't get fulfilled and you suffer, you feel like you're dying, but then you get reborn.
Right.
So the Saturn in the 8th is probably going to be good for those people to help them to deal with attachments better than other people. Saturn in the 9th house, not good for gurus, not good for religion, philosophy, and things like that. But I think that it gives a wisdom that is not simply religious and spiritual wisdom. Usually when you think wisdom, you think of the spiritual wisdom, the humility wisdom, like that. Saturn in the 9th house is not so good for religion and philosophy and gurus. But when you see Saturn in the 9th house, you will oftentimes see people that, although they don't have the spiritual wisdom, they have a practical wisdom. They don't believe in religion, they don't believe in gurus, but boy, they can look at life and perceive what needs to be done. So it gives a certain wisdom. That's as much as I can say about that. Saturn in the 10th house gives you the ability to organize and administrate. And when Saturn's in the 10th house, you have two kinds of people. You have one kind of person. Everybody with Saturn in the 10th wants a big career. Most of them have a very small career.
Affluency.
Because they feel scarcity and they think, well, I want a big career, but who am I? I'm no good. So they hold themselves back. The other people actually organize and administrate so that they can have a huge career. And anytime you put Saturn in an angular house, a Kendra, 1, 4, 7, 10, you've got a strong Saturn. You've got a strong Saturn.
Practical actually. Person becomes very practical. Ambitious.
Yep. And it can be the biggest of careers. And and with the father, it depends. It can be a father that is very restrictive, or it can be a father who's an authority figure. It depends.
True.
Saturn in the 11th house oftentimes can give some problems with friends, but at the same time, the person with Saturn in the 11th may be incredibly devoted to their friends, much more than other people. That person
few friends, but very few friends.
Yeah, but the friends that they have are friends for life, and they'll do anything for you.
True.
Because it's a strong, and they may have friends that are authoritative figures like that. The Saturn in the 12th house is really interesting for me I think I've mentioned this before on some YouTubes, that when I was revising my ancient Hindu astrology, I was going through all, I don't know, it's like 108 placements, the sun in all 12 houses, the moon in all 12 houses, all the planets. It was just a huge task. That's why it took so long. When it got to the 12th house, I had a real hard time. One of the things that I found was a real mixture of extremes. I found some people with Saturn in the 12th house where they had very poor sexual experiences. And then I found people with Saturn in the 12th that would go overboard with just extreme sexual enjoyment. I would find some people that were really good at holding on to money, debts and expenses, and some where it was the opposite. So I have a bit of a hard time with that. Some people with knowing how it's going to go. Some people will have trouble sleeping with Saturn in the 12th. But I would also say that the Saturn in the 12th house is likely to help a person. It's likely to help that person delve into the subconscious mind. 12th house is the subconscious. So they're going to want to fix whatever emotional, psychological problems they have. Whereas a lot of people will just ignore it and suffer and not get any better. These people will delve into the subconscious mind. Now, aside from Saturn, I wanted to mention something. There's a lot of people running around saying that they believe that the problems going on with the United States today is the Pluto return.
Right.
Pluto is coming back to natal Pluto in the United States horoscope. So, first of all, most mundane astrology being done today is not very accurate. Most mundane astrologers, they say stuff, nobody follows up to see if it's accurate. Most of the time it's wrong. But I do want to say that it sounds great. It sounds perfectly plausible. There's one problem, there's one teeny weeny problem with Pluto return causing the problems to the United States. And that is that the problems that the United States are having are happening all over the world, and they are nearly exactly the same. The political divisions all over the world, the authoritarian regimes all over the world, the selfishness, the calling it fake news, it's all over the world.
True.
I'm not saying that there's not some effect that Pluto is having on the United States, but to say that because the same problems we're having, everybody's having. What I'm saying is Pluto return in the United States chart might be doing something. But to say the political division, the authoritarianism, the just plain insanity that is going on in the United States, I would absolutely agree 100% if the rest of the world was normal and sane, but they're not. They're having the exact same troubles. The problems today are not due to one planet. The problems today are worldwide, and they're huge. My actual thought actually goes to the idea that there's two planets that haven't been discovered, so they say. Isabel Hickey said the one of them is called Vulcan. I don't know what that's about, but supposedly there's two planets that haven't been discovered, which makes sense to me because the real ruler of Virgo is not Mercury. Mercury rules Gemini. It makes perfect sense. Virgo is way too intense and serious to be ruled by it's ruled by it technically, but another planet will come along the way Pluto and Uranus and Neptune came along for Scorpio and Pisces. Something will come along to rule Virgo, and something will come along to rule Libra. Venus is great for Taurus, but Libra is all about fairness. It's all about justice. It's not, it's ruled by Venus now, but if one of those planets were to be discovered now, I'd say, wow, that's a hell of a planet because the world's going crazy. But who knows? I mentioned this in my Braha Sutras.
Mhm.
And and the proofreader was reading it. Dennis Boyle was reading it,
Mhm.
and he said, "Oh, this is really going to stir the astrological community." But
Right.
I don't know anything more about it. I think
Yes.
I think perhaps that when we find out, first of all, I think that whatever rules Virgo, when that planet is discovered, that's when universal health care may come into existence. I think when the real ruler of Libra is discovered, it's possible we might stop the wars. Well, these are my ideas. I don't know what anybody else thinks. I know that there's plenty of people that are aware that there's two other planets. Yeah, look, it works. It works when you're doing a horoscope. If Mercury is fallen and it rules that Virgo house, the Virgo house is a problem. The
Yeah.
same way Mars and Pluto rule Scorpio, Neptune and Jupiter rule Pisces, like that. But I have an interesting thought also that when we find out what really rules Virgo, we might understand why Rahu, which is supposed to be exalted in Taurus, actually functions way better in Virgo. Both, not just Rahu, both Rahu and Ketu function really, really well in Virgo.
Virgo.
Yeah. Can you put up that chart for a minute
Sure.
that yeah. So I use this chart in the Braha Sutras twice. The first is to help people understand that most of 90% of the mundane astrology, where astrologers predict what's going to happen, 90% of it is garbage. It never has any meaning whatsoever. And this is a good chart to show you because this is February 3rd, 1962 in America. It would be February 4th in
India.
In India, yeah. And if mundane astrology could be done, if we could really understand mundane astrology properly, this particular horoscope, you would imagine that in the days surrounding it or in the weeks surrounding it, maybe 3 or 4 weeks, all hell would break loose or something wonderful would happen. Something extreme would happen when all the planets were this imbalanced. Do you know what happened? Nothing happened. Zero, nothing. Of course, there might have been some countries who have their own horoscopes and were affected by this. I have no doubt of that. But for the world, nothing happened. Something happened 8 months later. I'll let you read the book to find out what that was. But that happened 8 months later. To say that, oh, this particular planetary configuration, I'll tell you what it was. It was the Cuban Missile Crisis, but it happened 8 months later.
Okay.
It's basically useless to say, oh, we could predict it 8 months. Why 8 months? Why not 12 months? Why not 6 months? The fact is, these planets were ridiculously imbalanced, and yet nothing happened. Okay, so this is similar to the people in I think it was 87, the harmonic convergence. The world was going to be peaceful and happy. If you Google harmonic convergence in Wikipedia, it says the world was going to go from thousands of years of war to a whole period of loving kindness and everything would be wonderful. And instead, nothing happened. And 9/11 happened, and it got worse and worse and worse. But so that's the harmonic convergence. The only thing that works in terms of the mundane astrology, in my opinion, is when you see planets going into signs that will cause something to happen. I also want to say that when I finished the Braha Sutras, all 216, 108 times 2, that's why it's 216. And I realized I hadn't addressed the issue of confusing horoscopes. So I analyzed this horoscope, but not with the ascendant. In other words, we're just going to look at this and look at what planets are well disposed and poorly disposed. And I analyzed these planets. So the Leo house would be very good because the sun rules Leo, and it's with Venus. The Ketu is the strongest planet in this horoscope because Ketu is so close to Mercury and Venus and Jupiter. So this person's going to be spiritual, metaphysical, artistic, film and photography. Artistic would be because of the Jupiter-Mercury conjunction. Then you've got Ketu being so strong with Venus, Mercury, Jupiter. So you've got the arts and film and photography. Anyway, so I analyzed this horoscope and I spent about 7 pages on it. And I explained that if you can understand how to analyze a horoscope like this, which the key to analyzing a horoscope like this is to look at the degree single planet and what each planet is doing, which planets are close to benefics and how close they are and how far away they are. And then the other thing is to judge simple mathematics. If there are 3 malefic aspects onto Taurus and 1 benefic aspect onto Taurus, the Taurus house is going to be afflicted. So it's math, and it's being able to see the specific degrees of each planet. One of the sutras in this book is, I was taught by probably Santanam in 1982, that in your own horoscope, if Jupiter transits Pisces, it's going to be extra good because it's transiting its own sign. Right. And when Saturn is transiting Aries in your own horoscope, it's going to be extra bad because it's going through its fallen sign. And I can tell you this, that doesn't work at all. No. But I was taught, that's how I was taught. What it's going to do in the skies, you know, you should find an astrologer that specializes in that, because I don't. Okay. I'm not saying it's not accurate. That's the one thing with mundane astrology that is predictable. This idea that, oh, there's 6 planets that are real good means nothing to the world. There's 4 planets that are real bad, doing terrible things. It's going to be real bad for the world. They never work. You hear them every 5-10 years. Oh, big predictions. Everything's going to be great from now on. It's garbage. But Jupiter and Saturn transiting signs for the world, that's going to have an impact. Yes. I'm not the one to say that. I don't know.
Right. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for your insights. And we are waiting for the book eagerly.
So I think most likely it will be early February, because the chance of it getting out by mid-December, we've only got 3-4 weeks, and it's a lot of work to get the layout. Then you send it to Amazon, they send it back, and you look at it. So if it's not mid-December, then it's going to be February. I won't put it out on the Mercury retrograde.
So, okay, thanks so much for being here, and hopefully we meet soon. And all the best, sir. All the best for your book.
And all hail Saturn. And please understand my apologies. My apologies to Shani, to Shiva, for any negative. And my apologies to all the students that read my books and think that I'm down on Saturn. Without Saturn, I would be nothing. And my upbringing from my father would have been nothing without Saturn.
Yeah.
Constantly teaching students by using Saturn because it's so good to show the troubles it causes.